Hey everybody, and welcome to this special on Chiron going direct in Pisces on the 2nd of January 2026 at 2:38 p.m. GMT time. I'm Amani, your holistic, karmic, astrological life coach, and I like to go in depth in all that I do. And all of my interpretations, especially when it comes to Venus, Mercury, Sun transits and everything really, are based on Vedic astrology, which is based on where the planets or the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, are any given time in the sky. And all times are in GMT time as well. So yeah, thanks for listening. So yeah, let's get into it, right? So the theme for Chiron going direct is the wounded healer's final gateway before new beginnings, because it's going to be moving into Aries on the 4th of March at 6:43 p.m. until the 3rd of August 2026 at 9:11 p.m. when Chiron goes retrograde in Aries as well. So yeah, going direct while still in Pisces on the 2nd of January 2026, moving into Aries 4th of March and going retrograde 3rd of August. So yeah, that's the timing. So Chiron is the asteroid that we call the wounded healer in astrology, and it's going direct in the very last degree of Pisces, the Sabian symbol. Each sign is made up of 30 degrees. Chiron's going direct in the 29th degree, which we call the Revati degree, and this is the completion point before a whole new cycle begins. And as I said, Chiron's going into Aries, a new cycle, right? And as Chiron is preparing to leave Pisces entirely after its journey through the sign of dissolution, letting go, ending, ghosting, ghosting your old life, moving into a new one, ghosting toxic relationships, habits and thoughts, surrender and spiritual wounding, where we had the energy to go within and look at our psychological, emotional, and spiritual trauma. We still have got 3 months to do that before Chiron moves into Aries, when we go into a new cycle, right? So Pisces is a water mutable sign, and it's a final spiritual healing point that's compassionate, empathetic, and wants us to step into our wounded wholeness. So it's not about trying to bury our pain, it's about accepting it and integrating it into our day-to-day life so we can live a full life. And at the time of Chiron going direct, it's making a square to Jupiter. This is when philosophical wounds, our belief system wounds, meet a healing crisis, and I'll go into what all of this means later. We've got Chiron making a sextile to the ascendant, and this is when the wounded healer can integrate into our personal identity. So as I said before, it's all about, accepting, forgiving, learning to manage our wounds, in opposed to, burying them and blocking them out. Chiron's also making a sextile to the midheaven, and this is when, healing work can become our public legacy. So this energy is saying, start that content channel, start that podcast, write that book, design that art, do whatever it is you've been putting off, design that game, whatever it is, and you may think, well, gaming, there's loads of games out there, and, I don't have the money and all of this, but sometimes, especially on app stores, people can fall in love with games that are quite repetitive, and I don't want to say boring, but I believe everyone's got their niche. Also, when Chiron's going direct, there's a T-square between Mercury in Sagittarius, Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, the moon and the ascendant in Gemini at 18% orb tightness, and there's also a 3-point stellium between the Sun, Venus, Mars in Sagittarius at a 33% orb tightness, right? So the body part that's ruled by this Sabian degree are the toenails of the right foot, and the wounded healer pauses at the very last degree of Pisces, creating a portal, a doorway, a gateway for final spiritual healing work before the entirely new cycle begins, right? And this station asks you to complete what you've been healing since 2018, to acknowledge both your wounds and your wholeness, to recognize that the journey's end is also the beginning. And it falls in the Nakshatra of Revati, Pada 4, and this gives us the power to nourish, to nurture and transcend, go beyond our immediate sort of like psychological, emotional and spiritual pain. Not to ignore it, but to not to let it sort of like keep us from reaching our goals and living the life we want to. So think of it like a final exam before graduation, or the last conversation with someone before they move to another country. That's the weight here. That's what we're dealing with, right? The finality, the ending is here, and there's something rather sacred about this particular moment. And in my years of tracking these cycles, I found and learned that when Chiron stations at the Untitled degree, the 29th degree, especially in Pisces, it brings up everything you've been healing, everything you've been avoiding, and everything that needs one last look before you truly move on. This is closer work, doing that inner child shadow work, and it gives completion energy, finishing up things. This is the universe asking, have you actually done the healing, or have you just been spiritually bypassing your way through life, right? I'm just going to talk a bit more about the energetic frequency of Chiron direct in Pisces and why this degree matters and what it means for you, right? So Chiron in Pisces has been teaching you about your spiritual wounds, right? The wounds around faith, around surrender, around trusting something larger than yourself, a higher power, whatever you want to call it. The wounds around addiction, escapism, victimhood, martyrdom, the wound around your connection to the divine, however you understand that word, right? And since Chiron has been moving through Pisces, sort of like targeting every place where you've been using spirituality and avoidance, addiction, whatever your, escapism method is, right, to bypass pain, where you have dissolved your boundaries to avoid conflict, where you have been sacrificing yourself on the altar of being spiritual, right? And I'm doing commas, but you can't see me. And now at the 29th degrees of Pisces, the very last degree before Chiron enters Aries, March, right? Chiron pauses, going direct, and this creates this intense, concentrated moment where all that healing work gets reviewed, integrated, or revealed as incomplete, right? And the honorific degree, the 29th degree of any sign, as I said, is completion energy. It's the final exam. It's show me what you've learned before we've moved on energy, right? And there's the sort of like the urgency, the importance here. There's a quality of last chance about it, not in a fear-mongering way, but in a this door is closing, so you need to walk through it, do it now sort of way. And Chiron direct means the internal healing work of the past 5 months, when Chiron's been retrograde since July, right, is now ready to move outward. What have you been processing, thinking about privately about your spiritual wounds and any other wounds, right? Maybe your healing gifts or capacity, ability to hold space for others' pain, and more importantly, your own pain, right? All of this is about to become visible in your daily life, because retrograde energy makes us go more within, and direct energy wants us to express ourselves more. And in this context of Chiron energy, express our Chiron energy more, our wounded self, right? But in a healthy, integrated way. The retrograde gave you time to review. The direct station says, right, now apply what you've learned, right? So positively, it's a deep completion of spiritual healing that's been ongoing since Chiron's been in Pisces, right? wanting us to seek proper closure, not just moving on. It's a recognition that your psychological, emotional, spiritual and other wounds have become and or can become, your greatest teaching tools and strength for helping yourself and others navigate and deal with similar pain. So, if you are thinking about starting, your own content channel or something like that, speaking your experience. And you may say, so many people are doing this, but what I believe everyone's got their needs. There's some people that will only listen to you. They won't listen to me or anyone else. They will only listen to you, right? And the things that you are going to say and the ways that you're going to say it, right? So I believe that, don't let that stop you, start. If you're thinking about doing a podcast, whatever you're thinking of, start, right? It gives us positively compassionate witnessing of our own suffering without drowning in it or spiritually bypassing it, right? It gives us the ability to hold both our wounded and healed self at the same time, understanding you're never fixed, you're never healed, you're always healing, and that's actually fine. It allows us to integrate mystical experiences, spiritual experiences into practical daily life rather than using spirituality to escape reality. It allows us to build healthy boundaries around empathy, feeling others' pain without absorbing it or making it our own. It allows us to do forgiveness work that's genuine, not performative, allowing us to release resentment because we are actually processing our emotions, right? It allows us to be more artistic or creative in our expression that channels pain into something beautiful that serves others. It allows us to trust in the healing process even when progress isn't linear or dramatic. It gives us the willingness to be visible about our wounds without shame or spiritual pride, right? And when this energy works well, we can recognize that healing isn't about erasing, burying, pushing down our psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds or transcending human suffering, going beyond it, forgetting it. It's about developing compassionate relationship with pain. And I've had to learn this on my journey when I was very much into a certain type of thinking. The motto was, go above it, it's bypassing emotions and all of that. But now I've learned to live with my pain, acknowledge it, but not to let it sort of like cripple me and stop me from moving forward, right? And it wants us to understand the teachings that pain and suffering can give us and use our hard-won wisdom to ease others' journeys and their pain. And it can help us to learn that spiritual maturity includes acknowledging limitation, and that boundaries are sacred, that sometimes the most healing thing is to simply be bearing witness to our pain rather than trying to fix or save others. Sometimes we just have to feel rather than intellectualize, right? But negatively, Chiron, direct energy, when the energy becomes more difficult, we need to watch out for spiritual bypassing, intensifying, using things like everything happens for a reason to avoid feeling your actual feelings, falling into victim consciousness, hardening ourselves, identifying so strongly with our wounds that healing threatens our identity, martyrdom patterns where you sacrifice yourself repeatedly and then resent others for not saving you, the inability to complete healing cycles, always finding new wounds, new trauma, new reasons you're broken, And as I said, this can be very tricky because I believe we have to go deep into our pain, but also believe there becomes a time when we have to sort of start integrating it. And this doesn't mean not feeling it, but also, like I said earlier, living with the wounded self and our new self at the same time. The two things can be true at the same time. We can be wounded and in pain, but we can still be working to bring change into our life and to do the things. And slowly, day by day, our pain will become less and less. It's not about waiting until when you're healed. It's about doing while you're healing, right? So, we can also use our healing journey as a performance, serving wounds for attention rather than genuine vulnerability. We can have boundary dissolution, that's disguised as compassion, absorbing others' pain. yeah, absorbing others' pain until you can't fully function. You can relapse into addictions or return to old escapist patterns when complacent anxiety, kind of comes up again. We can have a savior complex around others' healing, needing to fix or rescue rather than allowing their process, and just spiritual pride about how much you've healed, using your journey to position yourself as above others. And, we're all equal. Yeah, some of us may be further ahead in our healing journeys, but we're no better than anyone else, and we can have a resistance to actually finishing the work, staying in the process, because completed healing means moving forward, and sometimes, our wounded self can become our comfort zone. Enough humans in general love our comfort zone rather than new beginnings, so it can be hard to move forward, right? So when this energy becomes difficult, the urgency of the Arnoric 29th degree, right, can trigger panic about unfinished healing work, leading to either frantic attempts to finally fix yourself or complete avoidance through spiritual bypassing and escapism. And the square from Jupiter in Sagittarius may increase philosophical questions about suffering. We may say things like, why hasn't all this healing work made my life better? Whilst the T-square involving Mercury, Saturn, Neptune and Gemini, Moon and the Ascendant creates mental psychological confusion around what's actually healed versus what you've just intellectually processed without embodying, without living it, right? So Chiron is in the Revati Nakshatra, and Nakshatras are 27 lunar mesons in Vedic astrology, and as I fuse Western and Vedic astrology, I work with Sabian symbols and Nakshatras. So the Revati Nakshatra is the 27th and final one, ruled by Mercury, but deeply connected to Pisces' transcendent quality, which wants us to move beyond, our sort of like self and step into our higher self. It's symbolized by the fist and the drum. The fist representing the soul, swimming in the cosmic waters, the drum announcing completion and new beginnings. The deity is Pushan, and this is the nourisher and protector, the guardian of travelers, the one who ensures safe passage from one realm, way of living to another way of living, or from one place to the next. Chiron stationing in Revati Pada 4, specifically the final quarter ruled by Jupiter in Pisces, increases the sense of ultimate completion. This isn't just finishing a chapter, this is finishing the entire book. Revati's themes of journeys end, meeting, journeys beginning perfectly mirror Chiron at the Anaritic degree. You're standing at the threshold between, the cycle of Piscean cycle, spiritual healing, and a brand new cycle of Chiron in Aries that begins in March 2026. So Revati's power is to nourish and move beyond, right? And this describes exactly what this Chiron going direct is offering us. You're being asked to nurture yourself with completion, with acknowledgement of how far you've travelled and come, and experiencing life with the recognition of both your wounds and wholeness, and then to move beyond, not by transcending or bypassing, but by genuinely completing this cycle so you can authentically begin the next one. The shadow of Revati is the inability to complete, endless journeying, exploring, researching, avoiding arriving, right? Does this sound familiar? That's the exact trap this Chiron going direct can reveal. Have you been healing these past years, or have you been perpetually, continuously on a healing journey without ever allowing yourself to arrive at any kind of completion? And as I said, it's not about we never are fully healed, but we are meant to integrate what we've learned and move on, right? You know, to move through. If we see it as different levels, we have the first level when we're wounded, you know, we're upset, we're heartbroken. Then maybe a year or two pass and we're meant to get a bit further away from that heartbreak. Then year 3 and 4 a bit further, or for some of you it's in months, you know. But the point is here, you know, it's allowing yourself to move up levels rather than staying in the same place. An example of this is we've all been heartbroken, right? Or well, a lot of us have, and sometimes we cannot heal and go into a new relationship and carry that pain. And it's not about, you know, not carrying pain into the next relationship, because our experiences shape who we are, but sometimes we can ruin relationships because we're, you know, we just see them through the lens of our past, the new partners. And, you know, if we were cheated on, especially, we can think that they're cheating. And I'm not saying that they're not, you know, that, you know, sometimes you can attract similar partners, but my whole point is, you know, I say we focus on our own healing journey by making ourselves stronger so we can withstand the life crap, because life will always be throwing crap at us. This is how I live my life, but it's about making sure I've got me as a center as life does its thing. You know, I go through my experiences knowing that when I fall down, I've got me, and this is my message, you know, to get everybody to that stage when, you know, yeah, people will come into our life and try, but our thing is to, you know, spot the red flags early on, not to become hyper vigilant, give people, you know, a chance. But when they show you who they are, you know, believe them, sort of thing, and move on, and not to cut yourself off from people, but to move on to the next person. And this doesn't mean being intimate with everybody and all of that. No, it's about realizing that everyone is on a healing journey. We're all kind of messed up in this world. It's the way that it is, whether it be through childhood wounds, adulthood wounds, you know. So it's about, you know, getting real. Are you willing to accept this behavior? And if you're not, then you move away from it, because sometimes, you know, we can throw good after bad. And this doesn't mean not helping people. If a person is committed to healing and want to move on, then fine. But if they want to come into your life and bring you down, you know, and stop your healing journey, that's something you can't allow. You know, we must always give ourselves the loving, the affection, the fun that we seek from the world and other people. So when we are single and stuff, and we're looking to go into a relationship, we're not entering them from places of loneliness and desperation. We're entering them from a sense of self and completion within ourselves. And this doesn't mean being fully healed, but it's about being self-aware of your boundaries, knowing what you will and won't accept in a relationship, right? And Revati in Pada 4 is the mystical journey's end, and this asks you to actually land, to actually complete, to actually say, I've done this work and now I'm ready for what's next, you know. So to do the healing, start the healing, continue it, you know, be gentle with yourself, you know, and not to be hyper vigilant with the red flags, but not to ignore them also. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about more how this affects your real life, right? As I said, you know, as Chiron goes direct on a degree, this may sort of like influential financial patterns connected to victim consciousness or savior dynamics. So you can ask yourself, do you consistently attract situations where you are financially rescuing others, then feeling resentful about it? That's Chiron in Pisces revealing boundary issues around money. Or perhaps you've been the one that is always in financial crisis, unconsciously maintaining financial unstableness, you know, dangerous spending, risky behaviours, risky overspending and stuff like that, because being in need is familiar and safe to you. And I know, you know, we are in like a cost of living crisis worldwide, and, you know, we're having to budget our money a lot more and stuff like that. But also, you know, we still have to look into ways where we can save where we can. And I know it can be hard with high rents and all the rest of it. So I'm not trying to victim shame or anything like that. But it's also about getting real with yourself, because the completion energy of the 29th degree of Pisces ask us, what financial patterns from the past are you finally ready to complete? Maybe it's a pattern of lending money you can't afford to lose. Maybe it's undercharging for healing work because you believe spirituality should be free. Maybe it's avoiding financial planning because the universe will always provide, right? The square from Jupiter in Sagittarius might create some tension around our philosophical, our belief systems, our values, especially when it comes to money. Such as, in commerce, spiritual people shouldn't care about wealth versus the practical reality that you need resources to function in the material world. Yeah, we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience, and this doesn't mean we have to be billionaires, millionaires, no, but we have to sort of like provide for our own needs. The higher lesson of Taurus, which is a very earthy sign, is to, attract money, but not attract in the way, earn money, because when we say attract, then this can lead into spiritual bypassing in a spiritual way, but charging a fair price, as well. We're comfortable to you, but sometimes we have to go past our comfort zone because we have to not only charge a fair price, but also, meet our bills and our living cost and stuff as well. So Chiron going direct is asking us all to find mature kind of like growth and ground between spiritual values and pragmatic financial, practical down to earth financial health, right? On the political, social and collective level. So first I'm going to deal with the collective level. Chiron at the final degree of Pisces can reveal how society's relationship with suffering, compassion and healing has evolved or failed to evolve, and since 2020, we've been experiencing a global pandemic, massive social upheaval and chaos and collective trauma on a scale most of us have never witnessed before. And Chiron in Pisces has been teaching humanity about the interconnectedness of suffering. Your pain isn't separate from mine. Our individual wounds are part of collective trauma patterns, right? As I said earlier, we're living in a world where a lot of us, have one trauma or another, and this is not to limit our personal and individual trauma, but it's to see that as a collective we can heal. We need to set up systems, whether it be proper mental health care, medication, antidepressants and stuff can help to a certain point, but it also has to be therapy, and not just generic therapy. CBT doesn't work for everyone. DPT doesn't work for everyone. It's about finding the right systems, that, or sometimes it can be a mixture, holistic, because I'm a holistic astrologer, because I believe in a holistic approach to healing. Astrology cannot heal everything, but it can help us, right? This is why I have this podcast and individual holistic individual podcast where I talk more about the psychological, emotional and spiritual aspects of things, right? Even though I bring that into these astrological readings as well, because you have to take a holistic approach to heal ourselves, right? So this Chiron going direct brings visibility to how we've been responding to our collective wounding since the pandemic. Have we developed genuine compassion, or have we performed compassion whilst maintaining separation? Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, we're more, it seems like genuine compassion, but as the years gone on, it's turned into a performance. We've gone back to our old ways in general. So we can ask ourselves, have we learned to hold space for others' pain without trying to fix it? Or have we intensified our savior complex and martyrdom? And in some ways we have, right? And politically, we need to watch for themes around healthcare, especially mental health and addiction services, immigration and refugees, because Pisces rules those without homes or countries, and spiritual and religious institutions confronting their own wounding around power and abuse. And we're seeing this now, in a lot of countries, especially where I'm talking from, the UK, we have a big debate on immigration, and this is in worldwide, in most countries, Australia, America, the rest of Europe as well. But ultimately, if we look at it, these are people that are displaced on the whole, and these are countries that are torn apart, and in a lot of cases have been told apart by, a lot of the, the countries that are facing the influx of immigration. So we have to look at fixing the root problem, helping these people, have better living spaces in their own countries. And I believe this is one way of healing the immigration crisis, not by just saying you can't come and all of this, but getting to the root, fixing the root causes of why they are coming to different countries in the first place, because a lot of the time there's no opportunities to progress and stuff in their own countries. And we can say, oh well, that's not our fault, but it is our problem because they're coming to our countries. And I'm not saying this in a sort of way, I believe in immigration. I don't believe there should be borders. We should be able to move in to countries we want to whenever we want, and as long as we're, not causing any harm to others there and all the rest of it as well. There's got to be boundaries, of course, but we also have to get real of the real issues. We have seen that, and we will continue to see that as Chiron moves into Aries. And the completion energy of the 29th degree shows that systems which have failed to do authentic healing work over the past years might find some kind of reckoning and karma, and we're seeing that, right? And where there's a lot of calling out moments and vibe checks, and everything's catching up with these sort of like nations that have been abusing other nations as well. And as this moment of truth, and vibe check and payback on actions is happening, and the ending that comes as Chiron prepares to enter Aries, right? And the T-square involving Mercury, Saturn and Neptune and Gemini, and the moon and the ascendant shows collective confusion around narratives. What stories have we been telling ourselves about suffering, healing and compassion? And are those stories actually true or just comforting? Are the stories of why people are coming into different countries true, or just, causing more tension and division in our society, in our nations, and I believe at the core, we all as human beings just want to live in safe places on the whole, have our basic needs met, have some of our luxury needs met, let's get real. And we want to live in peace. We don't want to live in the war and the decisiveness that we are actually living in now. So now I'm just going to talk a bit about the psychological, creative and spiritual meanings. So psychologically, Chiron being in the 29th degree represents the completion of spiritual and psychological healing cycles that began when Chiron entered Pisces, right? And if you've been doing therapy or personal development work, depth psychology, shadow work, trauma healing, Chiron going direct may bring up deep integration of that work, or it might reveal where you've been intellectually understanding your patterns without actually, doing the work to transform them by changing your day-to-day thoughts and actions, right? And creative expression can become a powerful healing tool during this station, because Pisces rules art, music, poetry, dance, all the ways we channel the sort of like ineffable, the unknown into form, right? And if you've been using creativity to process your wounds, and honestly, isn't that what most art is? This station means direct, right? Pisces going direct might bring a sense of completion to a body of work, or clarity about what needs to be expressed next, right? Spiritually, this is completion energy around your relationship with faith, surrender and the mystical. So you can ask yourself, what have you learned about your connection to something larger than yourself, whilst Chiron's been in Pisces? What spiritual beliefs have deepened and which ones have revealed themselves as bypassing mechanisms? So all in all, because Chiron going direct is in the Revati Nakshatra, the guardian of travelers between worlds. This is what the Revati, rules, right, represents. This can bring vivid, mystical experiences, dreams or intuitive downloads about your spiritual path forward. And the Sagittarius stellium with the Sun, Venus and Mars, which will influence us over the next 3 months, where Chiron's in Pisces waiting to go into Aries, right? And this stellium provides a adventurous fire for exploring new spiritual territories, paths, whilst the square from Jupiter asks whether the philosophical frameworks, our belief systems, actually support what we are living. Are we embodying healing or just creating pretty concepts that don't translate to real life, right? So now I'm just going to talk a bit more about the key aspects that are happening during this Chiron going direct, right? As these are going to influence us the whole 3 months Chiron's direct in Pisces. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about what these aspects, add to Chiron going direct, right? So Jupiter square to Chiron, which is 1.27 separating, is the tightest aspect during Chiron's going direct, right? And it's separating, meaning their intensity peaked recently, but their effects are still active, right? So Jupiter in Sagittarius, squaring Chiron in Pisces, creates friction between our philosophical expansion, growth, and spiritual wounding, between our quest, our need for meaning, and the reality of suffering. Jupiter wants answers. Jupiter wants understanding. Jupiter in Sagittarius in particular wants philosophical, belief systems, frameworks that explain why things happen, what it all means, how suffering serves growth, right? But Chiron in Pisces knows that some wounds don't have satisfying explanations. Some suffering doesn't serve anything, and sometimes the healing work is simply bearing the unbelievable without needing it to mean something big and grand, right? And this square might manifest as disappointment that all your healing work hasn't fixed your life in the dramatic ways you're expected, and you've done the therapy, maybe the meditation, the shadow work, plant medicine, every healing technique and modality, right? You could find and you're still human, still struggling, still wounded, and Jupiter square Chiron asks, can you make peace with being continuously I will learn to speak one day, perpetually, continuously in process rather than finally healed, right? The separating orb shows this philosophical crisis around healing peaked recently, late in December 25, and now you're integrating the understanding that healing isn't linear. It's not a straight line, right? Completion isn't perfect, and wholeness includes woundedness, and this aspect supports the Revati energy of nourishment through completion. You're nourishing yourself by releasing the belief that healing should transform you into someone who doesn't hurt anymore, right? And as I said, this lesson came hard and sharp to me, but I do find it as truth, and accepting that truth has helped me to move on and accept my flaws, like, the fact I mispronounce words and stuff like that. Anyway, something I used to hide away from before and be embarrassed about. So yeah, Chiron sextile the ascendant, with the ascendant in Gemini, represents how you present yourself to the world, your immediate reactions or identity at the surface level. And Chiron sextiling the ascendant during Chiron going direct has been, building for a while, this energy, because it's separating now, and it means that your wounded healer energy has been integrated into your public persona, or can be. It wants us to integrate it into our communication style, our way of being in the world. And the Gemini ascendant gives you the natural curiosity, communication gifts, and mental flexibility. So for the next 3 months, it's really good, as I said, to do that content creation work or any other new thing, applying for a job, whatever it is you're wanting to do. And Chiron adding this energy here means you might have been learning to talk about your wounds without saying, or it's given us the energy to do so, to share your healing journey in ways that serve others, to use your Gemini communication skills to articulate the deep, the things we find hard to explain, the uncertainty, the unknown, right? The experiences of Piscean spiritual healing. And the separating orb shows that integration work is largely done. You've learned how to embody, how to live the wounded healing energy in daily interactions. Now, as Chiron goes direct, preparing to leave Pisces, the sextile is completing. The question becomes, how will your identity change when Chiron enters Aries in March 2026 and begins an entirely different healing cycle, focus on individual will rather than spiritual ending, right? So Chiron also makes a sextile to our midhaven, our career, our public road, right? And unlike the previous two aspects which are separating, completing, this one's applying at 3.26 degree orb, meaning it's building towards us that contact in the coming days and weeks. And and the midheaven in Virgo represents your public role, career, reputation, legacy, what you are known for in the world, and Chiron sets styling the midheaven, shows your healing work is becoming visible as your professional path or public contribution, starts to show. Virgo midheaven supports us and wants us to serve, to heal through practical means, to improve systems, to organize chaos into functional order. Chiron in Pisces is adding his energy that helps us to learn to blend, to mix Virgo's pragmatic, down to earth, hands-on service with Pisces spiritual understanding. And Pisces and Virgo are opposites of its 12th house and 6th house energy, right, in the natal or transiting chart, and it gives us grounded mysticism, practical compassion, healing work that addresses, confronts both our material needs and soul wounds. And because the orb is still applying, it's still building. And as Chiron goes direct on the 2nd of January and then moves forward through the final degree of Pisces, taking several weeks to clear the 29th degree completely before entering Aries in March, this sets will tighten, right? So we can expect increased visibility around our healing work, opportunities to, professionalize your spiritual gifts or the recognition for service you've been providing, often invisibly for years. And the Revati Nakshatra energy here is powerful. The safe passage and nourishment become your professional offerings, and your legacy might be about ensuring other people's safe transition through difficult passages, about nourishing those who are crossing thresholds, about being the guardian who witnesses and supports without fixing and saving, right? So now I'm going to talk about the karmic meanings and soul lessons. So the soul work of this transit is, Chiron, the asteroid himself, the wounded healer, is already a karmic indicator. The wounded healer, the one who carries the unhealable wound and learns to transform suffering into service. When Chiron goes direct at the very last degree of Pisces, preparing to complete its cycle, the karmic intensity increases dramatically. This station is asking you to review every spiritual wound you've carried, not just in this lifetime, but through multiple incarnations. Pisces is the sign of the collective unconscious, past lives, karmic debt and grace. Chiron moving through Pisces has been surfacing soul-level wounding around faith, trust, surrender, victimhood, martyrdom, addiction and spiritual bypassing. And the soul work here connects to Revati symbolism, the fist and the drum. Journey's end, meeting, journey's beginning. Revati is in the final Nakshatra, and Pusan, the deity, is the guardian who ensures safe passage between realms, including the passage from death to rebirth. You've carried the pattern of unsafe passages through lifetimes, births that were traumatic, deaths that were violent, transitions that lacked witnessing or nourishment. And Chiron in, the fourth pada, the mystical journey's ultimate end, reactivates this pattern. Past lives that held experiences where you cross thresholds alone, unprotected, unnourished may surface, come to your attention in dreams or thoughts. Maybe lifetimes where you were the traveller without a guardian, where you journeyed endlessly because arriving meant facing what you've been running away from, right? And where completion terrified you more than, the perpetual, the continuous process, right? You wanted to just stay in the comfort zone, stay in the processing phase and not go into the new phase, right? And the karmic lesson isn't about finally healing these ancient wounds. It's in some kind of permanent way, as I said, wounded healer, Chiron shows us that a lot of us will always be wounded throughout our lives, but it's about not letting those wounds stop us from being other things as well. And Revati's power to nourish and transcend through completion shows something more nuanced, more subtle. You're learning that completion doesn't mean erasure, that transcendence includes embodiment, living it, that the journey's end is also the beginning. You're being called to use Revati Revati's gift of safe passage, not just for yourself but for others making similar crossings. And in terms of the generational patterns, family karma around suffering, addiction, mental illness or spiritual wounding may come into focus and surface. Pisces rules what's dissolved, what's hidden, what's unspoken. Your family lineage, your generation, your family likely holds patterns of pain that couldn't be acknowledged. The alcoholic grandfather, the mentally ill aunt, the mystic who was labelled crazy, the sensitive one who was told they were too much, right? Chiron at 29th degree Pisces asks, what generational wounding around sensitivity, spirituality and suffering are you finally ready to complete? Not by fixing your ancestors or by taking on their pain as your own, but by acknowledging it, witnessing it and choosing differently for your own life going forward. The completion energy means you're at the end of certain patterns, carrying them, and the square from Jupiter in Sagittarius can create tension around family beliefs, like we don't talk about that. Beliefs such as suffering builds character, and things like spiritual things aren't real versus your lived experience of healing work being essential. Chiron going direct gives you permission to complete those inherited narratives and begin new ones. So now I'm just going to talk about the life development influences, right? So in terms of education and learning, Chiron in Pisces at the completion degree can bring closer to educational plans related to healing, spirituality, psychology or the arts. If you've been studying these subjects, formally like degrees, certifications, or informally through books, workshops, personal practice, videos, podcasts, this sort of thing. Chiron going direct sort of like marks, represents a graduation of sorts, not necessarily finishing a program, but completing a learning cycle and preparing for the next phase. The square from Jupiter in Sagittarius, as Jupiter rules higher education, right? So some tension between philosophical learning and lived wisdom. You might recognize that you have been accumulating vast knowledge about healing without necessarily integrating it into daily practice. And Chiron going direct asks, what have you actually learned versus what have you just intellectually understood? And there's a difference, right? Because we can intellectualize till the cows come home all day long, go round and round and round and round. I've been there. The mind will always have another depth to go and stuff, and sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's not. The feeling I've experienced through meditation and just like shutting down the mind chatter, that solutions can just come up naturally when we're not always having the constant mind intellectualizing going on. In terms of our career, right, the set style from Chiron to the midheaven is the key aspect here. Your healing work is becoming your professional path for some of you, whether that means literally healing professions through therapy, body work, energy healing or astrologers, whatever, or bringing the wounded healer consciousness into whatever profession you're in by being more empathetic or compassionate or something like that. Virgo, the midheaven there wants practical service that improves systems and helps people function better. Chiron in Pisces adds spiritual depth and compassionate understanding of suffering, and together they create grounded mysticism, healing work that addresses both practical needs and soul wounds. So this station might bring professional opportunities related to completion, finishing projects, wrapping up client relationships and ending work cycles that have run their course, right? Trust that what completes is making space for what's coming next. When Chiron enters Aries in March, an entirely different healing cycle comes, focus on individual will and courageous action. So this is where we take what we learn in Pisces and the previous cycles of, Chiron in Aquarius and all the other signs, right? And, go into service, starting that business, starting that self hustle, changing that career, starting that course, whatever it is you want to start. In terms of our home and living situation, Pisces rules spaces of retreat, sanctuary, ending, and Chiron stationing here might bring changes to your home environment that supports healing, integration. Maybe you finally create a dedicated meditation space or clear out belongings that carry old wounding, or establish boundaries around ground who enters your sanctuary. The anotic degree energy shows completion around housing situations, leases ending, mortgages finishing, living situations that have served their purpose naturally dissolving. If you've been considering a move, this station might bring clarity through timing or direction. In terms of financial planning, Chiron stationing in Pisces at the completion degree asks you to review financial patterns connected to victim consciousness, savior dynamics, or spiritual bypassing around money. Are you finally ready to complete the pattern of financial instability, the pattern of undercharging for your gifts, the pattern of rescuing others financially, then resenting them? The square from Jupiter in Sagittarius can create tension around philosophical beliefs around money, such as I said earlier, spiritual people shouldn't care about wealth, but this station supports integrating spiritual values, pragmatically with our financial health, and it reminds us that we can be both spiritually awake and financially responsible. Both and, not either or. We don't have to choose. Two things can coexist at the same time, as I said earlier. So now I'm just going to talk about some best activities to do in the 3 months that Chiron's going direct. And I know I've mentioned them, but I'd like to go in depth. So I mentioned some surface things, but I'm going to go in depth now. So you can, for your body, physical body, do water-based movements such as swimming, aqua yoga, or simply floating in water in the bath or having showers. Pisces, fluid nature and Chiron's healing work supports water work, right? The buoyancy of the water, the flexibility, allows your body to release in ways it can't on land, on the ground, on the earth, right? In terms of foot care rituals, since the Sabian degrees the toenails of the right foot, so give your feet attention, and Pisces rules the foot in astrology. So, foot baths, soaks, reflexology, massages in general. Remember that your feet have carried you through your life journey, and they deserve to be honouring. You can do gentle yin yoga. Pisces and Chiron both favour surrender over force, and this is feminine yin energy. So yin poses, feminine poses, yoga poses for 3 to 5 minutes, holding them for that long. Allow fascia to release and emotions to surface without pushing. You can also do dance or singing as prayer, free-form movement with eyes closed, letting your body express what words can't. Very Piscean, very healing. In terms of your mental and emotional health, you can do completion journaling, asking yourself questions and writing about what you've healed. Since Chiron's been in Pisces, right, be specific. What patterns have changed? What wounds have you developed compassionate relationship with? You can witness yourself through witness consciousness meditation. So practice observing your thoughts and emotions without identifying with them, healing the Piscean tendency towards merger and boundary and disillusion. Forgiveness work, who or what are you ready to finally release through genuine forgiveness? And it can be hard. A lot of people I know, and in general, it can be hard to let go of, and can be hard, but sometimes, it's better to try at least, not by spiritual bypassing, but actual completion of resentment, or starting or continuing the work, or trying to come to a place where you make peace with it. This doesn't mean you let these people back in your life or these situations back in your life, but it means that it allows you allow yourself to move on from it, right? You can also do some dream journaling, because Pisces rules dreams, and the station can bring vivid symbolic dreams about completion and transition. Record them immediately upon waking up. In terms of your creative expression, you can create something that represents, the healing journey of Pisces Chiron being in Pisces rather, right? You can do collages, painting, poetry, create music. Let the creative process itself be the healing, rather than I need to create a masterpiece. No, create anything. That's where healing begins, right? You can do water-based art, such as watercolors, fluid, acrylics, anything that involves the Pisces water element moving on its own rather than being controlled. Sound healing, singing, toning, humming, using your voice to vibrate stuck emotions loose, like something like that, right? You can also do spiritual practices, so on the 2nd of January, you can mark this energy going direct consciously, light a candle, review your healing journey, acknowledge what's completing, express gratitude for the lessons. You can do ancestor work, since Pisces connects to lineage and the collective. This station supports rituals honoring your ancestors and releasing inherited wounding. You can do compassion meditation, such as Tonglen practice or similar, breathing in suffering, breathing out compassion for yourself and all beings. You can make changes to your life practically, like finishing projects and relationships that have run their course, tie up loose ends before the energy changes. When Chiron enters Aries in March 2026, you can protect your sanctuary, right? Establish stronger boundaries around your personal space and who enters it, reducing numbing behaviors. Pisces and Chiron together might trigger urges to escape through substances, overindulging in, drugs, alcohol, or anything else, screens, scrolling, social media, or disassociation. Notice when these urges come up with compassion rather than judgment, right? So now I'm going to talk about the 12 sun, moon and rising signs and how Chiron affects you individually. So Aries, this is the warrior, learning to surrender. So when Chiron hits your sun, moon and rising sign, so if you got Aries, sun, moon and rising, you're getting the same core message. Your courage is being tested by your vulnerability. Chiron in Pisces teaches you that real strength isn't about charging forward without feeling. It's about feeling everything and moving forward. Your Aries nature may want action, results, and to start new things, but Chiron has been showing you that the deepest wounds are the ones you have been too proud or too scared to acknowledge. And with Chiron going direct at the 29th degree of Pisces, the completion degree is asking, have you actually been doing the healing work, or have you just been performing courage whilst drowning underneath? So the real situation, if Tyrese has been transiting your sun, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the brave one, you're also the vulnerable one, the scared one, the one who needs help sometimes. That's not weakness, that's wholeness. If it's your moon, that's Aries rising. Your emotional world has been shifting from defended to open. You've been learning to feel your feelings without being controlled by them, to assess vulnerability without losing your edge. If Aries is your rising sign, people may have been seeing you differently. You've not just been the confident warrior anymore. Your courageousness allows you to admit when you're afraid, and that's really impressive. And what's completing right now, the square from Jupiter in Sagittarius, is asking you all, whether you've got sun, moon or rising in Aries, to integrate what you have learned philosophically and by putting it into action. You may have understood intellectually, but vulnerability is a strength, right? You may have understood that on an intellectual level, but now you're being asked to actually live it, not just think it, not just talk about it, actually embody it. So what this means practically is that projects you've been hesitating to start might finally feel ready to launch, but only if you're doing them for the right reasons, not to prove something. Relationships where you've been too defended might reach natural completion or deepen into real intimacy. Your healing work is becoming something you can actually do, not just think about. The completion energy means you're finishing the cycle where you've learned that real courage includes admitting when you've been scared, so watch out for impatience with the completion process. Aries wants to move now, but Chiron's asking for conscious closure first, using action to avoid feeling as well. Watch out for that. Avoidance, feeling the pain, the grief of what's completing. Maybe, also watch out for going forward into a new path before actually finishing the old cycle, and the temptation to go back to pure bravado and courageous and being like, emotions are weakness because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. The real opportunity when Chiron enters Aries in March 2026 is that you're entering a cycle where your individual healing becomes your primary work. The station is preparing you for that. You're learning to be the warrior who fights for their own healing, not just everyone else's. That's the real battle. That's where your courage actually matters. And the Revati Nakshatra energy here is crucial for safe passage, nourishment, journeys end and meeting, journeys beginning. You're learning to be your own guardian, to nourish yourself through completion, to trust that endings actually do lead to new beginnings, not because you're charging forward, but because you're allowing the natural cycle to complete. Taurus, Sun, Moon and Rising. The builder here is learning that security includes vulnerability. So whether Chiron hits a Sun, Moon or Rising sign, you're getting the same core message. Real stability isn't about controlling everything. It's about feeling safe enough to be vulnerable. Chiron in Pisces has spent years teaching you that your need for security doesn't have to mean emotional numbness. Your Taurus nature wants to build something lasting, wants touchable, tangible results, wants to feel safe. But Chiron's been showing you that the deepest security comes from emotional honesty, not from avoiding difficult feelings. So Pisces is asking, what are you finally ready to complete around your relationship with resources, self-worth and emotional safety? The real solution, if Chiron's been transiting your sun, you've been learning what you're worth isn't determined by what you earn or what you've built. You're valuable because you exist, not because you're productive or stable. If Taurus is your moon sign, your emotional nature has been changing from defended to open. You've been learning that real nourishment includes emotional honesty, that genuine comfort includes vulnerability. If it's your rising sign, people may have been seeing you differently. You're not just a stable, reliable one anymore. You're the grounded person who's also emotionally aware. That's actually more trustworthy. And what's completing the square from Jupiter in Taurus is asking you to expand your sense of what's possible. You've been learning that you can be both spiritually evolved and financially responsible. You know, your healing work has value, your gifts deserve compensation, you're worthy of security without having to earn it through constant productivity. So practically, you may see that financial patterns that have repeated might change suddenly and finally. You know, like undercharging for your work might reach natural completion. Your capacity to receive is integrating. Relationships where you've been emotionally numb might reach completion and end or deepen into real intimacy. Your capacity to feel deeply whilst remaining grounded is developing. The completion energy means you're finishing the cycle where you've learned that true stability includes emotional authenticity. Watch out for guilt around having resources or wanting more. That's old programming, not truth. Spiritual bypassing around money. Spiritual people shouldn't care about wealth and all of that. That's bull crap. You need resources to function. Resistance to completing financial cycles because stability feels boring. The temptation to go back to the emotional numbness because feeling is uncomfortable. The real opportunity is that your healing work is becoming something you can actually charge for. You're learning that grounded presence combined with spiritual understanding creates real value in the world. You're learning that self-care isn't selfish, that boundaries are sacred, that you can be nurturing without being a martyr. The Revati Nakshatra energy here is powerful. Safe passage, nourishment, journeys end. You're learning to nourish yourself through completion, to trust that what is ending is making space for what's coming next, not through force but through allowing the natural cycle to complete right. Gemini, Sun, Moon and Rising, the communicator learning that words need heart, right? So Gemini, whether this Chiron hits your Sun, Moon and Rising sign, you're getting the same core message. Real communication isn't just about information, it's about vulnerability. Chiron in Pisces has spent years teaching you that words have power precisely because they can carry emotion, not just data. Your Gemini nature wants to explain everything, wants to understand, wants to communicate, but Chiron's been showing you that some things can't be explained. They can only be felt, witnessed and held. The station at 29 degrees Pisces is asking, what are you finally ready to communicate that you've been afraid to say? The real situation is, if Chiron's been transiting your sun, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the smart one, you're also the sensitive one, the one who feels deeply, the one who understands things beyond logic, right? And if it's your moon sign, your emotional nature has been changing from defensiveness to open. You've been learning to feel your feelings rather than just thinking about them, to access vulnerability without losing your mental clarity. If it's your rising, people may have been seeing you differently. You're not just a clever one anymore. You're the intelligent person who's also emotionally aware. That's actually more credible. What's completing now is that you've learned to communicate your authenticity without saying people are hearing your real voice, not just your performed voice, Your healing work can become visible as your professional path if you choose it. You're learning to use your communication skills to serve healing, not just share information. So practically, this means that words that may have been holding you back may finally find expression. The things you have not been saying. Your healing journey is becoming something you can actually teach. Your capacity to bridge the gap between rational and mystical is integrating. Relationships where you've been emotionally distant might reach completion or deepen. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that vulnerability in communication creates connection, but watch out for using words to avoid feeling. That's your default, and Chiron's asking you to stop intellectualizing your journey rather than living it. Fear that being honest about your wounds makes you less credible. It doesn't. It makes you more credible. The temptation to go back to pure mental analysis because feeling is uncomfortable. Watch out for that. And the real opportunity is that your voice is becoming your healing tool. You're learning that authenticity is more powerful than cleverness, that vulnerability in communication creates real connection. The set style to your midhaven supports using your communication skills professionally. You're learning that the most important thing you can communicate is the truth. The Revati Nakshatra energy here is crucial for safe passage, nourishment, journeys, and you're learning to use words to guide others safely through difficult passages, to nourish them with truth rather than just information. Your voice is becoming a healing instrument tool, For Cancer, Sun, Moon and Rising, the nurturer learning that care includes boundaries, right? So Cancer, whether Chiron hits the Sun, Moon or Rising, you're getting the same message that real nurturing isn't about self-sacrifice, right? It's about boundaries. Chiron in Pisces has spent years teaching you that your capacity to care is a gift, but only if it's boundaried right. Your Cancer nature wants to nurture everyone, wants to feel safe, wants to be needed, but Chiron's been showing you that real care includes protecting yourself, that genuine compassion includes saying no sometimes, that being present doesn't mean absorbing others' pain. And when Chiron goes direct, it's asking, what are you finally ready to complete around your emotional caretaking patterns? And the real situation is that, if Chiron's been transiting your sun, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the nurturing one. If your sun signs in Cancer, that's what I mean, then, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the nurturing one. You're also the one who needs care, the one who has limits, the one who can't fix everyone. If your moon's in Cancer, your emotional nature has been changing from merged to boundaried. You've been learning, or should have been learning, to feel others' pain without absorbing it, to present without losing yourself. If it's your rising, people may have seen you differently. You're not just the caring one anymore. You're the compassionate person who also has healthy boundaries. That's actually more, trustworthy in doing so. And, what's completing is that you should have learned to express your emotional needs, or, start or continue the work of doing that. People can hear what you actually need, not just what you're offering them. Your emotional wisdom becomes your professional gift. You're learning that serving others and protecting yourself aren't mutually exclusive. You should do both of them, right? And practically, this means that caretaking patterns that have exhausted you might finally change. Relationships where you've been the emotional support might reach natural completion or rebalance. Your capacity to nurture yourself is integrating. Home and family situations can change as you establish healthier boundaries. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that self-care isn't selfish. Watch out for guilt about having boundaries. That's old programming, not truth. Using emotional caretaking to avoid your own healing. Resistance to completing relationships that have run their course because you feel responsible for others. The temptation to go back to self-sacrifice because boundaries feel uncomfortable. And the real opportunity is that your emotional wisdom is becoming your professional gift. You're learning that genuine care includes boundaries, that real compassion includes self-protection, and it supports using your nurturing abilities in service work if you choose so. And you're learning that the most important person you need to care for is yourself. And the Revati and Nakshatra energy here is powerful. Safe passage, nourishment, journeys end, learning to nourish yourself through completion, to be the guardian for yourself that you've been for others. Your emotional awareness is becoming a healing tool, not a burden. For Leo, Sun, Moon and Rising, the creator learning that authenticity outshines performance, right? So if Leo's your sun, moon or rising sign, real light comes from authenticity, not performance. That's your lesson, right? So Chiron is teaching you that your creative gifts have value precisely because you're real, not because you're impressive. Your Leo nature wants to shine, wants to be seen, wants to create something magnificent and amazing. But Chiron's been showing you that vulnerability in your expression creates connection, that being seen as wounded is more powerful than being seen as perfect. And when it's going direct in the 29th degree of Pisces, it's asking, what are you finally ready to create and say that requires your genuine self, your genuine self-expression? So if Chiron's been transiting, so if your sun's in Leo, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the brilliant one, you're also the vulnerable one who struggles, the one whose wounds inform your art. If your moon's in Leo, your emotional nature has been changing from performance to authenticity. You've been learning to express your feelings genuinely rather than dramatically, to be emotionally honest rather than emotionally controlled. If it's your rising, people may have seen that you're not just being the impressive one anymore, you're the creative person who's also real, and that's actually more radiant. And what's completing now is that you learn to express yourself authentically. People are seeing or should be seeing your real self and not your performed self. Your creative work is becoming your professional path for some of you. You're learning that authenticity is more marketable than perfection. So practically this means creative projects you've been hesitating to say might finally feel ready. Your healing journey is becoming part of your creative expression. Your ability to be vulnerable in your art is integrating. Relationships where you've been performing might reach completion or deepen into real intimacy. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that authenticity is more powerful than perfection. But watch out for using creativity to perform rather than express. That's your default, and Chiron's asking you to stop. Watch out for fear that saving your wounds, dampens, diminishes your light. It doesn't. It makes you more brighter, more luminous, right? Resistance to being seen as anything other than brilliant, and the temptation to go back to pure performance because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. So the real opportunity here for Leo, Sun, Moon and Rising is that your creative work is becoming your healing tool. You're learning that vulnerability in your expression creates real connection, that authenticity is more powerful than perfection. You're learning that the most important thing you can create is something true, and the Revati and Nakshatra energy here is crucial. Learning to use your creative gifts to guide others safely through difficult passages, to nourish them with truth rather than just beauty, and your radiance, your brightness, your light is becoming more powerful because it's more real. So for Virgo, Sun, Moon and Rising, the helper learning that surface includes surrender is your theme. And when the Sun Moon or rising are in Virgo and Chiron goes direct, right? You're getting the same message that real service isn't about controlling outcomes, it's about allowing others their process. So with Chiron in Pisces, you've spent years teaching that your practical gifts combined with spiritual understanding create grounded service. Your Virgo nature wants to help, wants to improve things, wants to fix what's broken, but Chiron's been showing you that real healing includes surrender, that genuine service includes boundaries, that you can't control other people's feelings and healing journeys. So you're being asked to finally be ready to complete service patterns, like asking yourself, what are you finally ready to complete around your service patterns? If Chiron, if your sun is in Virgo, you've been learning that identity isn't just about being the helpful one. Maybe you're the person that also needs help, right? The one who has limits, the one who can't fix everything. If, Virgo is your moon sign, your emotional nature may have been changing from controlling to accepting. You've been learning to feel your feelings rather than managing them, to accept them and other things that you can't change. And if Virgo is your rising, you have maybe not just been the competent one anymore. People may have been seeing you differently as the person who, who is helpful, but also emotional aware and in touch with their emotions and have feelings too. And that's actually more trustworthy, right? You've learned to express your emotional needs clearly. People are hearing what you actually need, not just what you're offering them. Your healing work is becoming, your sort of like professional legacy, if you want to, do that. You're learning that good enough is perfect, and practically this means that service patterns that have been exhausting you might finally change. Your professional healing work is becoming more visible. Your capacity to serve without controlling is integrating. Perfectionism that's been preventing you from sharing your gifts might actually release now. And the completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that surrender is part of service, but watch out for perfectionism, as it can prevent you from actually helping anyone. And that's the trap, right? Using service to avoid your own healing, resistance to completing work cycles because there's always more to do, the temptation to go back to controlling because surrender feels uncomfortable. And the real growth opportunity here is that, maybe allowing your healing work to become your professional path. You're learning that grounded presence combined with spiritual understanding creates real values, supports, makes your service more visible and valued, and that the most important thing you can do is help others without needing to control their lives and outcomes. And the Revati Nakshatra energy here is powerful. You're learning to guide others safely through difficult passages without needing to fix them, and your practical wisdom is becoming a healing sort of like presence, right? For Libra, Sun, Moon and Rising, your theme is the diplomat, learning that harmony includes honesty, and whether, your sun, moon or risings in Libra, you're getting the same core message that real balance isn't about keeping everyone comfortable. It's about being authentic. So Chiron in Pisces has been teaching you that your relationship gifts have value precisely because they're real, not because you're diplomatic. Your Libra nature seeks harmony, wants connection, wants everyone to be comfortable. But Chiron's been showing you that real harmony includes honesty, that genuine connection includes vulnerability, that balance requires saying no sometimes and not being codependent, right, and being independent. Chiron here is asking you, what are you finally ready to complete around your relationship patterns? If Chiron's been, if your sun's in Libra, you've been learning that your identity isn't just a balanced one. You're also the one with strong opinions, the one who can be direct, the one who sometimes needs to disrupt harmony for authenticity, right? If it's your moon, your emotional nature has been shifting from diplomatic to honest. You've been learning to express your feelings authentically rather than diplomatically, to be emotional rather than emotionally managed. If it's your rising, people have been seeing you differently. You're not just the pleasant one anymore. You're the relationship person who's also real, the person who relates to others but is real with it, and that's actually more magnetic, more attracting, more trustworthy. You're completing, that you have to express yourself authentically. People are meant to hear your real voice, not just your diplomatic voice. And you're learning that an authentic connection creates real value, and practically this means that relationship patterns that have been repeated might finally change. Partnerships where you've been too accommodating might reach natural completion or rebalance, right? Your capacity to be authentically yourself in relationships is integrating. People pleasing that's preventing you from being real can be released, and the completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that authenticity creates real harmony. So watch out for people pleasing preventing you from being authentic, right? That's your default, and Chiron's asking you to stop. Also watch out for using harmony seeking, to keep the peace, to avoid necessary conflict, to grow through relationships, for them to be more authentic, right? And resistance to completing relationships, ending them after they've run their course, because you want to keep things nice and pleasant and diplomatic, right? And also watch out for the temptation to go back to pure diplomatic codependency expression, because honesty feels uncomfortable. The real opportunity for you, Libra, Sun, Moon or Rising, is that relationship wisdom can become your gift. You're learning that real connection includes authenticity, that genuine harmony includes honest communication, and that the most important thing you can do in relationship is be real, right? And be true to yourself. The Revati energy here is that you're learning to guide others safely through relationship passages and changes, to nourish them with truth rather than just pleasantness, right? And your presence is becoming more powerful because it's more authentic. So for Scorpio, Sun, Moon and Rising, your theme is the investigator, learning that depth includes compassion. So whether you got Scorpio, Sun, Moon or Rising, your message is real power includes vulnerability. Chiron has been teaching you in Pisces that your ability to go deep serves healing, not just destruction. Your Scorpio nature wants to understand hidden things, wants to penetrate the core, wants power. But Chiron has been showing you that real depth includes compassion, that genuine intensity includes surrender, that understanding darkness requires also understanding light. So, you're being asked, and a good question to ask yourself is, what are you finally ready to complete around your depth work, your inner child, shadow work, psychological healing, personal development, whatever you've been doing. And if Chiron's been transiting your Sun in Scorpio, you've been learning that identity isn't just the powerful one, you're also the vulnerable one, the one who feels everything, the one whose wounds inform your understanding. If your Moon's in Scorpio, your emotional nature should have been changing from defended to open. You've been learning to feel your feelings deeply without being controlled by them, to access vulnerability without losing your power. If Scorpio is your rising sign, and people may have been seeing you differently, that you're not just the intense one anymore, you're the powerful person who's also compassionate, and that's actually more formidable and stronger, right? A strength. You've learned to communicate your depth authentically, or should be learning that, or continuing or starting that work. People can hear your real understanding, not just your defended understanding, when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, and your psychological wisdom can become a professional gift. You're learning that depth combined with compassion creates real healing work. So practically this means that psychological patterns you've been investigating might finally change. Your healing work is becoming something you can actually share. Your capacity to hold depth without being overwhelmed is integrating. Relationships where you've been emotionally defended might reach an ending or deepen. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned, or should be learning, that vulnerability is strength, but watch out for using depth as an excuse to stay in darkness. That's your trap. Intensity that prevents you from being vulnerable. Resistance to completing psychological cycles because there's always more to explore and look into. The temptation to go back to pure power because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. So the real opportunities that you know, allowing your depth to become your healing guiding tool, you know, learning that real power includes vulnerability, that genuine intensity includes compassion and empathy. It supports using your psychological understanding professionally, and that the most important thing you can do is understand others without judgment, and to guide others safely through psychological passages, changes, to nourish them with understanding rather than just intensity, you know, and your presence is becoming more powerful because it's more compassionate. For Sagittarius, Sun, Moon and Rising, your theme is the seeker, learning that meaning includes mystery. So whether your Sun, Moon or Rising's in Sagittarius, you're getting the same message. Real wisdom includes acknowledging that you don't know. So Chiron in Pisces has been teaching you that your philosophical gifts have value precisely because they're humble, not because they're certain. Your Sagittarius nature seeks meaning, wants to understand the big picture and wants answers, but Chiron's been showing you that real wisdom includes mystery, that genuine faith includes doubt, that understanding meaning sometimes mean accepting meaninglessness, right? That's things, some things don't have any meaning or explanation, and that's cool. So Chiron in Pisces is allowing you to be finally ready to complete your philosophical research and frameworks. You know, what are you ready to let go of or change and upgrade? If Chiron's transiting your Sun in Sagittarius, you've been learning that your identity isn't just the wise one, you're also the confused one, the one who doesn't have all the answers, the one whose wounds inform your understanding. If it's your Moon, your emotional nature has been changing from defended to open. You've been learning to feel your feelings rather than just philosophizing about them, to access vulnerability without losing your faith. If it's your rising sign, people can see you differently, that you're not just optimistic anymore, you know, you're the philosophical person who's also realistic, and that's actually more credible, right? So what's finishing up for you guys is that you've been learning to communicate your understanding authentically. People are hearing your real wisdom, not just your performed wisdom, and you're learning that grounded wisdom creates real value, right? So practically this means that belief systems that no longer serve you can finally be released. Your healing work is becoming your spiritual path. Your capacity to hold both faith and doubt is integrating. Spiritual bypassing might finally be recognized and released. That the completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that real faith includes vulnerability. But watch out for using philosophy to avoid feeling. That's your default, and Chiron's asking you to stop that. Spiritual bypassing can intensify when completion anxiety, you know, comes up, and the resistance to releasing beliefs that have defined you, and the temptation to go back to pure optimism because doubt feels comfortable, right? So the real opportunity is your philosophical wisdom is becoming grounded. You're learning that faith includes vulnerability, that genuine understanding includes mystery. You're learning that the most important thing you can teach is how to live with the uncertainty of life, the chaos, right? And the Revati energy here shows that you're learning to guide others safely through spiritual changes, to nourish them with wisdom that includes mystery, and your faith is becoming more powerful because it's more honest, right? Capricorn, Sun, Moon and Rising, your theme is the builder, learning that strength includes vulnerability, and whether your Sun, Moon or Rising's in Capricorn, it's the same message, that real authority isn't about being invulnerable and not being emotional and being emotionally shut off and cold. It's about being real. Chiron has been teaching you whilst it's been in Pisces that your ability to build lasting routines and structures has value precisely because you can understand their fragility, right? That things, structures can crumble, routines may need to change, right? Because life may throw events at you like a death or a relationship ending or whatever. And your Capricorn nature wants to build build something lasting, wants to control and wants to be seen as competent, right, as knowing and competent and knowing what you're doing. Yeah. Anyway, Chiron's been showing you that real strength includes acknowledging limitations, that genuine authority includes vulnerability, that being in charge means sometimes admitting that you don't know what to do. So Pisces is asking you, what are you finally ready to complete around your control patterns? And if Chiron's been, if your sun's in Capricorn, you've been learning that your identity isn't just a strong one, you're also the vulnerable one, the one who struggles, the one whose wounds inform your leadership, right? And it shouldn't control it. You need your emotions to help you be a better leader, basically. And if your moon's in Capricorn, your emotional nature has been changing from control to accepting. You've been learning to feel your feelings rather than manage them, to access vulnerability without losing your authority. If your rising's in Capricorn, people have been seeing you differently. You're not just competent, you're the competent one, the one who knows it anymore. You're the capable person who's also human, and that's what you should be learning with this energy, and that's actually more trustworthy. So you're completing the fact that you should have been learning to communicate your limitations, your flaws authentically, and people should be hearing your real self, not just your controlled self, right? So ultimately, Capricorn, Sun, Moon and Rising, you're learning that real authority includes admitting that you don't know. And practically, this means that control patterns that have limited you may finally change. Your professional work is becoming more authentic. Your ability to lead without controlling is becoming more integrated. Relationships where you've been emotionally distant might reach completion or deepen. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that vulnerability is strength, but watch out for control preventing you from being authentic. That's your trap. Using competence to avoid emotional vulnerability, resistance to completing cycles because you want to maintain control, and the temptation to go back to pure authority because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. So the practical wisdom is becoming your gift, right? Being practical, learning that real authority includes vulnerability, that genuine leadership includes admitting your flaws, your limitations. So you're learning that the most important thing you can do is lead with integrity. So the Revati in the sacred energy is that you're learning to guide others through difficult changes, to nourish them with wisdom that includes honesty. Your authority is becoming more powerful because that's more real, right? For Aquarius, Sun, Moon and Rising, this is the visionary, learning that revolution includes using your heart. So Aquarius, whether your Sun, Moon or Rising's there, you're getting the same message that real change isn't about detachment, it's about compassion and empathy. Chiron has been teaching you that your visionary gifts have value because they're grounded, or should be grounded, in human suffering. Your Aquarius nature wants to revolutionize and change things, wants to be objective, wants to go beyond, transcend emotion. But Chiron's been showing you that real change includes compassion, that genuine revolution includes vulnerability, and the most powerful visions are those that are informed, led by understanding what it means to be human and to hurt. So Chiron, going direct in Pisces, is asking you, what are you finally ready to complete around your detachment patterns? If Chiron's been transiting your sun, you've been learning that your identity isn't just a visionary one, you're also the feeling one, the one who cares deeply, the one whose wounds inform, lead your vision, or should lead your vision, right? If your moon's in Aquarius, your emotional nature has been changing from detached to engaged. You've been learning to feel your feelings rather than just observing them, to access vulnerability without losing your objectivity, right? If Aquarius is your rising sign, then maybe people have been saying that you're not just a revolutionary one, the one who likes change, who's detached anymore. You're also compassionate, and that's more influential now, that you also are human, you're attached, and you're learning to communicate your vision authentically. People are hearing your real understanding, not just your detached understanding, and you're learning that revolution grounded in compassion creates real change, and practically this means that the attachment patterns that have isolated you might finally change. Your healing work is becoming your contribution to collective change. Your ability to care deeply whilst remaining clear is integrating. Relationships where you've been emotionally distant might reach completion or deepen. The completion energy means you're finishing a cycle where you've learned that vulnerability serves vision, but watch out for detachment preventing you from being authentic. That's your default, and Chiron's asking you to stop using objectivity to avoid emotional vulnerability. Watch out for that as well, and resistance to completing cycles because you want to maintain distant, and also for the temptation to go back to being purely detached and shut off from your emotions because it feels uncomfortable to be open. The real opportunity for you, Aquarius, Sun, Moon or Rising, is that your visionary wisdom can become your gift as you learn that real change includes empathy and compassion, that genuine revolution includes vulnerability. And the most important thing for you guys is, to change systems, change the world with your heart and compassion, right? And the Revati Nakshatra energy wants you to learn to guide others safely through revolutionary changes, to nourish them with vision that includes compassion, and that your influence is becoming more powerful because it's more human. For Pisces, Sun, Moon and Rising, your theme is the mystic, learning that transcendence, going beyond includes living it, embodiment. Whether Chiron hits your Sun, Moon or Rising in Pisces, the same message, the core message is the same, and that's real spirituality isn't about escaping the body, it's about living in it fully. Chiron has been teaching you that your own sign, deepest wounds and greatest gifts around transcendence, right? And wanting to merge and dissolve boundaries that must have boundaries, which is a paradox, right? That you must fully live life as well. Your ability to go beyond and to merge and to understand that others is good, but you also have to recognize your own feeling and also be based in reality as well. Chiron's been showing you that real spirituality includes grounding, that genuine transcendence includes embodiment, living what you know, right? And that the most powerful mystical experiences are the ones you can actually integrate into your daily life. So the question to ask yourself is, what are you finally ready to complete around your spiritual journey? And if Chiron is hitting your Sun in Pisces, you've been learning that identity isn't just about being the spiritual one. You can also be the practical one. You can be many things, right? The one who needs to function in the material world, the one whose wounds are asking to be integrated, not transcended and pushed down, right? If your moon sign is in Pisces, right, your emotional nature has been shifting, changing from dissolved to boundaried. You've been learning to feel your feelings without merging with others' emotions, to access mystical awareness without losing yourself. And if Pisces is your rising sign, you may have not just been the ethereal spiritual one anymore. You have been seen, people may have seen you more differently as the spiritual person who's also grounded now, and that's actually more trustworthy, and that's what Chiron in Pisces wants you to do. You have been learning to communicate your spiritual understanding authentically, and people are hearing your real wisdom, not just spiritual bypassing. And you should have been learning that grounded spirituality creates real healing. It doesn't avoid it. So practically this means that spiritual bypassing patterns might finally be recognized and release. Your healing work is becoming more embodied, more lived in, not just ethereal. Your capacity to be mystical whilst remaining functional is integrated. Addiction or escapist patterns might actually change as you learn to be present. The completion energy means you're finishing the cycle where you've learned that transcendence includes being here, right? Being in the here and now in planet Earth. Yes, we are spiritual beings, but we're on Earth right now, right? In bodies. So watch out for spiritual bypassing, as this can intensifies when endings and completion anxiety comes up. That's your trap, not wanting to move into the next phase. When Chiron's in Pisces, right, watch out for using spirituality to avoid dealing with practical life as well. Resistance to ending cycles because you want to stay in the process. And and in your comfort zone, right? And also the temptation to go back to pure transcendence because, living it feels uncomfortable. So the real opportunity for you, Pisces, Sun, Moon and Rising, is powerful because Chiron is stationing direct in the final degree of your own sign in Revati, in Nakshatra, the guardian of safe passages between words. It's asking you to complete your cycle of learning about your own wounding and your own gifts. You're learning that real spirituality includes paying your bills, maintaining relationships and showing up in your body. You're learning that transcendence doesn't mean disappearing. It means being fully present to what's actually here. The set style to your midhaven supports making your spiritual work visible and valued. You're learning that the most important thing you can do is to help others ground their spirituality, to guide them safely through passages between worlds, the material and the mystical, the conscious and the unconscious, the individual and the collective. The Revati, the sacred energy here is your own completion, the safe passage, the nourishment, the journey's end, meeting, the journey's beginning, the fish swimming in the cosmic waters, and you're learning the ocean includes the soul, right? That you can be mystical and practical, you can transcend and be embodied and live it, right? And be fully in reality. And when Chiron enters Aries in March 2026, you're entering a cycle where individual will and courageous action become the primary work, right? The station is preparing you for that. You're learning to use your spiritual gifts, not to escape, but to serve, to be the guardian for others, that you're learning to be for yourself, right? So trust the completion, trust that journey's end is also the journey's beginning, and that's your most powerful work ahead in 2026, right? So now I'm just going to finish up with some self-reflection questions that can help you and some other things, right? So we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left, guys. So if you want to go deeper, grab your journal and sit with these questions. No judgment, remember, just awareness. So you can ask yourself, what healing have I actually completed since Chiron entered Pisces? And what am I still, continuously working on that needs to end, right? The completion energy means it's time to acknowledge what's actually changed rather than maintaining identity as always healing. For instance, maybe you've done 5 years of therapy around childhood wounds, and whilst you're not healed in some perfect way, you have developed a compassionate relationship with these wounds. You can recognize the patterns when they come up without being controlled by them. That's completion, even though the wound still exists, right? Versus something you've been working on for years that hasn't changed at all because you've been intellectually understanding it without actually living the change. So just remembering that, recognizing your healing journey, knowing that it's continuous, that we're always healing, right? To tell the difference between genuine healing integration and the endless process that never lands and ends, right? You can also ask, where am I using spiritual bypassing to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions, right? So Pisces and Chiron together can create deep spiritual wisdom or, elaborate deep avoidance defense mechanisms. And Chiron going direct in Pisces asks you to be brutally honest about which one you've been practicing. Say you're in a relationship that constantly leaves you feeling unseen and undervalued, but you tell yourself everything happens for a reason, and this is teaching me patience. That's bypassing. The spiritual language sounds evolved, but it's actually keeping you stuck in suffering that you could choose to leave, right? Remember that real healing might mean acknowledging that relationship, that the relationship isn't serving you and acting accordingly by leaving it or trying to fix it, Also ask yourself, what would ending this cycle require you to let go of? Sometimes we resist completion because it means releasing something, as I just said. And what I've been saying throughout this, right, we can grow attached to identity as wounded, our familiar patterns, our comfort with certain kinds of suffering. You can ask yourself, am I nourishing my myself through this completion, or am I forcing it? Revati's power is to nourish and move beyond. The ending should feel like nourishing closure, not violent severance ending, right? If you're forcing yourself to be done with something, you haven't actually processed it. That's not healing, that's more bypassing. But also know when to let go, know when you are ready, know when you're just making yourself being stuck in your comfort zone as well. Also ask yourself, what does safe passage mean to me as I prepare to enter a new healing cycle? Revati is the guardian of travellers, ensuring safe passage between realms. And as Chiron prepares to leave Pisces and enter Aries in March 2026, what would support your transition? What would make it feel safe rather than terrifying, right? So in conclusion, I'm just going to give you the key takeaways, what matters most about Chiron going direct, right? So it marks the end of a healing cycle. This isn't just any, station direct. It's happening in the Antarctic degree, the final degree before Chiron enters a entirely new sign. And the urgency here is that, we have to end things, the finalities here. There's something rather sacred about this particular threshold of ending and moving on to new things. The most important aspect is recognizing that completion doesn't mean perfection. You're not trying to finally fix yourself or erase your wounds. Chiron teaches that some wounds remain. They become integrated, transformed into wisdom, used to serve others, but they don't disappear. Hence, Chiron is known as the wounded healer, right? The goal isn't transcendence over your humanity. It's a compassionate relationship with your wholeness, right? Which includes your woundedness, right? The Revati and the Nakshatra energy here is important. Safe passage, nourishment, journey's end, meeting the journey's beginning in Chiron in Aries, right? You're learning to be the guardian for yourself that you perhaps lacked in earlier transitions earlier on in your life, right? To nourish yourself through completion and endings rather than forcing it, and to trust that endings actually do lead to new beginnings. So to work with this energy, this requires you being honest and doing inventory about what's actually changed versus what you've just been perpetually, continuously processing, going over and over. And yes, we have to revisit things, do the sadder work and do the psychological, emotional work, but we also have to move on. So ask yourself, where have you done the genuine healing work versus where you've used spiritual language to avoid uncomfortable change? The square from Jupiter in Sagittarius supports philosophical integration, making meaning from your healing journey without needing the meaning to be dramatic or special. Sometimes suffering just is, healing just is, and the meaning comes from how you respond rather than why it happened. The set stars to your ascendant and midhaven support making your healing work visible in your identity, your communication, your professional path, in every area of your life, right? This isn't about performing healing or spiritually bypassing your way to enlightenment. It's about the genuine integration of the wounded healer consciousness into daily life. So ultimately, this is completion energy. As I said, this is the final degree of Pisces, the final Nakshatra, the end of a cycle. Whatever you've been healing, whatever patterns you've been working with, whatever wounds you've been tending to, looking after, healing, acknowledge the journey, honor how far you've traveled, recognize both what's healed and what remains unhealed, and love them both. The work is real, but so is the transformation available to you. You've survived everything you've experienced. While you're still alive, you may feel like, no, I haven't, but I understand it's tough, right? None of this is easy. I deal with my own wounds, my own psychological illnesses and physical ones as well, so I understand, right, that it's not easy. Some days we have better days, some days we have lower days, right? But we have to learn to hold both the wounded and the healed aspects of ourselves at the same time, and that's wholeness. That's the medicine that Chiron offers, right? For us to trust the completion, to trust the transition, to trust that the journey's end is also the beginning, right? So yeah, thanks for listening, guys, especially if you've listened to it all, right? I'm Amani, your holistic astrological life coach, and it's been my pleasure doing this for you guys. And I would really appreciate wherever you're listening to this that you follow this. So, because I'm starting natal astrology as well, so I'm going to talk about natal placements. I'm starting with natal Venus, then I'm moving on to Pluto, because I see these as the most important ones in astrology. The journey is going to be a 2 to 3 year one, because I'm going in depth. As you know, I'm doing sort of videos of 7 minutes, then I'm doing part 2s and part 3s that are longer, but you know, I'm hoping to help you guys on your journey of self-healing. So yeah, take care and see you next time.